Yeah, well, what's interesting, and this is kind of another one of those contrasts. So, Captain Lord, he had sort of aspired to fill the ranks and the role of the shoes of Captain Smith to carry the wealthy and the famous across the Atlantic. And of course, he falls and he ends his career, Captain Lord, carrying nitrates to South America. Beautiful euphemism there for bird droppings. Versus Captain Rostrun does sort of fill the shoes of Captain Smith and becomes essentially the next Captain Smith of just this very respected captain. He was in this crucible and proved himself, and so he became, yes, this very successful captain and reputation that everyone should aspire to. Of just this.
Welcome to Season 3 of Titanic Talk. Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd launch once again onto the digital airwaves with some very special event episodes. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries and continue to explore all aspects of the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic, groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Actors, historians, authors, descendants and fans come here to talk about Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams. Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries is distributed in the US by Freestyle Digital Media. It's now available to rent or own on Apple TV, Amazon, and many other platforms. Please be sure to like and leave a review.
I'm Nelson Aspen, and we're so glad you're back for another episode of Titanic Talk. I'm fresh off the plane from Belfast, and it lived up to all my Titanic expectations. I hadn't been there in a quarter century, and that was before Titanic had taken over the city. So more on that later. But if you haven't yet been to see all the glories of Titanic's birthplace in Belfast, I highly recommend it. I also highly recommend seeing Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, the documentary that spawned this podcast and all the glorious friends we have made as a result. When my lovely co-host Alexandra Boyd and I recently went to Titanic weekend on the 113th anniversary of the sinking, we boarded the Queen Mary in Long Beach, California, and one of the other guest speakers, fellow Titaniac, has become a close friend and colleague of ours. So we are excited to bring her to you today, in case you haven't already met her. Alexandra, will you do the introductions?
Well, I certainly will. And there were a plethora of speakers at that Titanic weekend. And Kelly's presentation stood out to me because it had such a unique angle. I'm going to read a little bit of her biography to fill you in on just how steeped in this world she is. She's a leadership consultant, a public speaker, researcher, and author. So she has a book, which is titled Leadership in Crisis, the Titanic, the Carpathia, and the Californian. So you know there's a triumvirate of stories there. And she intertwines her historical expertise with academic training. She studied at the University of Notre Dame, or not Notre Dame, as you say here in the United States.
And she's no Quasimodo. She's a beauty.
Yes. And she's used a little known piece of the Titanic story. We know it because we know about the Californian through Peter White and his scenes in Titanic that were sadly cut. And so she uses the Titanic story as a lens to explore critical topics such as personality and organizational psychology, organizational and command climate, team cohesion, trust violation, and repair integrity and moral decision-making. Kelly Skwarcan, welcome to Titanic Talk.
Oh, thank you, Alexandra and Nelson. It's such a pleasure to be here with you both.
You are a unique guest to us because of this academic background you have. Tell us how you fuse together. I mean, I see the direct connections, and we can tell, knowing what your talk is about. We know where you're coming from, but explain to us what, why, how, where Titanic and this academic study came to you.
Yes. So actually, I want to take you back to fourth grade. This is really where all of it starts. And I think those of us in the Titanic community, we kind of know fourth grade, around that age, there's something magic about it where it seems to
Your ears
captivate.
are open. Yes, you're ready
Yes.
to receive.
Yes. Well, I was one of those who was captivated around age 10. It was with a passion project where we had to do a 2 week project on our life's passion. And of course, we're 10. What is that? Giraffes, Queen Elizabeth the First. Those were my two best ideas. So, to put a long story short, my dad had me watch a VHS tape, and I do remember what those are. Grew up with those. It was dusty, grainy, black and white, nothing cinematic about it, but it just captivated me. And from that moment on, I started reading every single Titanic book I could get my hands on.
Which movie was it?
Oh gosh, it was a National Geographic, just like grainy old documentary. I couldn't even tell you what the name of it was. It was, I think it had quite a lot of clips of the wreck. So it must have been like one of those that came out almost directly after they found it. But
Okay.
anyway, so that got me started. And I quickly became the lunchtime bore of the school because I would ask my friends to quote unquote quiz me about the Titanic. Just ask me any question and I would see if I could answer it. And then from
Adorable.
there, I would know, like, oh, okay, I don't know that. Let me go investigate more. Or, yes, I do know that. Okay, fantastic. Um, well, as you can imagine, that lasted about 5 days. And then finally, one of my friends said to me, Kelly, you know so much about Titanic, just write it down, get it all out, and we never have to hear about it again. So that very summer, this was in between fourth and fifth grade, I did. It was kind of a dare, but I put pen to paper and this became a book that evolved with me and grew through the years, truly from fourth grade up until gosh, came out in just like 2 years ago, coming up on 2 years. So it has been a long project, but the book is Iron and Ice, Full Tale of the Titanic. So that the book itself is sort of to give you the market pitch of it. As we know, there are so many books written about Titanic that are sort of one of two extremes. They're either uh, very dense historical texts, which have their place and are so valuable. We absolutely need those. But then there are also books that are geared more to children and the very younger part of the market. This book, Iron and Ice, is trying to target the middle of those two extremes by being a more narrative driven book, where it brings the characters and the people to life and is nonfiction, stays true to the story, but is a bit more approachable for your average person who wants the full detailed story but doesn't want all the minutia all at once.
What I think is really fascinating too, listening to you talk, was that you broke down the characters and the personalities of these leaders, like these captains. So there were three captains. Let's say, okay, they're in charge. Literally, they're in charge. And I've been an officer's wife many moons ago, and I understand that hierarchy of you don't question the guy in charge, even if you think he's a bit of an idiot, which most of them did most of the time. That's my job. It's like being a director. Oh, I could direct that. Everyone else wants to be the director, but you're the director. So you have to have the courage of your convictions, and you delve into that. Do you want to sort of, tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah. To kind of gear you more towards, okay, how did the leadership and the psychology come into this? Because all of this is quite a long story. So I was at Notre Dame and I was majoring in psychology, planning to like pursue psychology as full-time career. And I was approached to create a case study for the Notre Dame Naval ROTC Battalion on essentially lessons in leadership that we can glean from parts of the Titanic story. So I did that, really enjoyed it, and it just became a thing quite organically, and something I never anticipated doing. Personally, I don't have any, like, I wasn't a part of ROTC. I don't have any particular connections there. So this was a world that I unexpectedly fell into, but really enjoyed because the whole goal and purpose of what I've been trying to will want to accomplish in life and continue doing, is to use the research from psychology to improve individual team and performance. So with Titanic, we have this natural dichotomy between the Californian and the Carpathia. And looking at the individual personalities of those two captains, Captain Lord and Captain Rostrun, and the ways that their personalities influence the command climates on board their vessels. Some of you might have heard of the construct of psychological safety. That's kind of a hot term these days, but for a long time it's been a construct we've been studying in organizational psychology because it has such bearing on whether or not individuals feel comfortable coming forward to express ideas and concerns, push back, dissent, things that are so important for avoiding not only catastrophic failures, so many examples of that, not only with Titanic, but just like airline disasters, other things like that. But your day-to-day things.
Sets, I told that story on the Queen Mary. You're sitting there, the money is burning as you're waiting for somebody to make a decision, the director, or it might be a PA who goes, why don't we do this? And it's up to the director to make the ultimate decision. But ultimately, the best idea has to win. The best idea wins. And this actor was saying on their set, that's what they lived by, because the director producer was like, we can't afford to make a mistake, because for them it's money. It might be life and death, but best idea wins. But if you roll back 113 years to these men, these military men who were, who just were brought up to think that their point of view was the correct one, and their minions had to follow them, there was a huge disconnect there.
So true. So true. And you have to have accountability both up and down the chain of command. So pragmatically, how do you do that? How do you work with a captain?
Kelly, it's so brilliant the way you have taken the Titanic as the example for your lessons in leadership and accountability. And I'm just curious as to, if it weren't Titanic, are there other things in your life that might have fit into that same outline?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't been asked that before.
Because I happen to know you're a group fitness instructor.
Yes.
That's one of the things, as I was anyway, before my niece went. But in seeing your personality, even here on a Zoom call or in person at the Titanic weekend, you have a natural leadership ability. And I think, oh my God, when you're talking to a room full of young soldiers, say military academy students,
yes.
they must just be eating out of your hand because of your natural gifts, your vivaciousness, your intelligence, your ability to communicate. But if it hadn't been Titanic, you would still have the same messages to put out. What might else could it have been?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. I think, it might have been a little bit more on the group fitness angle. I do love that. And gosh, it is interesting to think about, how I teach as a venue for how I approach leadership. And I think my general group fitness philosophy is always, I want to be very approachable. And I always, as I'm sure you did in your group fitness teaching days too, of just making sure that everyone feels very comfortable to kind of do their own thing. Group fitness is an interesting space because everyone needs to cohere and kind of keep with the group, but at the same time, it's a very individualized thing where you might be working with somebody who has an injury, or someone who's pregnant, or someone who has a heart condition, and you got to kind of keep the group together, but also make sure people feel comfortable doing their own thing.
Well, spoiler alert, in your presentation, you gave us moments of assignment where you would tell us, all right, have a think about this. I don't want to spoil anything, but it was like being in a really fun collegiate environment. You would make your point beautifully, and then you would have us go away for a few minutes and take that lesson to come back with. I mean, you're obviously a natural born teacher.
I
Thank
also
you.
want to I just also want to interject that it was super interesting to watch Don Lynch's little enclave of people like earwigging on Don, really thinking about the questions you were posing to him. And he's like, I called him Sir Don of the Titanic, Lord Don of Titanic.
Oh,
And,
that's so fitting.
yes, and he was genuinely, well, I think this. And well, I could see that he was being posed questions that he hadn't necessarily been given cause to think about before, from such an angle. It is unique in its process, for sure.
Yeah, I really like the whole topic of rebuilding trust and delving deeply into the IO, so industrial organizational psychology literature. There's a really good framework that has emerged for both rebuilding trust and just building it at the outset, a relationship. And that's competence, benevolence, and integrity. I think that's very useful, just for all of us day to day and whatever relationships we're talking about. It could be family, it could be business, competence, just being competent at whatever the task assignment is. Benevolence, always acting with the other person in mind. If you were to ask them, say, hey, does this person actually make decisions in your best interest? Do you feel that reflected? The answer is yes. Great, you're on the right track. And then integrity is an interesting one because that's such an easy value to toss around flippantly and not really think about what it truly means. So often I ask the midshipmen, cadets, whoever it may be, to break that down and think about on a pragmatic level what integrity means. The literature conceptualizes it in two different parts. The first part is that there's an alignment between what you personally value and what the organization values. And the second part is that this is often what we say when we say, what do we think about integrity as? It's that the values are externalized. They're not just lip service. And other people are seeing those values actually reflected in your actions.
So bringing it back to Titanic, you started to go to the Californian and the Carpathia. Just give us that balance between those two captains and mistakes, errors, and good decisions that were best decisions that were made.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So what's interesting is that, so not to make everything very deeply psychology research, but I do want to mention this one meta-analysis because it directly the findings that I found from my research of the Californian Carpathia are directly in line with what this meta-analysis showed. So it looked at the Big Five and HEXACO personality constructs, which are gold standard personality assessment when we're talking about like academic psychology. So the H of HEXACO is honesty, humility. And the meta-analysis found that this construct predicts leadership effectiveness over and above anything the Big Five previously could. So there's just something magic and very special about a leader who has this scores highly on honesty, humility. And in my research on Captain Lord versus Captain Rostrun, what quickly became apparent is that Captain Lord would have scored quite low on honesty, humility. I think we can see that pretty evidently reflected in the way that he went about the inquiry responses, some of the things going on the voyage back from mid-ocean back to Boston, calling crew members into his cabin, demanding statements, all these sorts of things.
Bring his ass,
basically. Yeah, like basically lying and trying to have this whole cover-up thing.
But in his defense, and I'm just being the devil's advocate here, wasn't it protocol to shut down the wireless at a certain hour? I mean, of course, he's the villain of the piece, but it wasn't a big surprise, was it? I mean, for a man in his position to shut down the Marconi room and go to bed?
No, so with the wireless, of course, Cyril Evans was the only operator on board, and he had just gone off watch. The real issue with Captain Lord's leadership is just the fact that I find it very hard to believe that when Stone called down to report that he saw white rockets being fired, that's a very clear A to B. You know what that means. And so to suggest that those are company signals when it's been clear and communicated to you several times that those are white rockets, that has a very clear response that you need to take as a leader, as a captain.
They shouldn't have been red ones, and Titanic didn't have any red rockets, so they were just firing white ones. That wasn't that they kept firing rockets. Peter White, who played Third Officer Groves on the Californian, his research said that they saw the white rockets and they thought they were just having a party and throwing, fireworks in the air. They could not believe it was Titanic sinking. There was all this sort of connection of preconceived, the assumptions, and they went to bed. But ultimately it lay with the captain, who, is where your research lies. I can tell. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's just the response, especially after they realized that it was Titanic that went down. It would have been very different if Captain Lord's response was, "Oh my gosh, I made a colossal error. Let me express remorse for that in some way." And we don't see him do that at all. Quite the opposite. And that's in contrast to Captain Rostrun's response to immediately turn the ship around, not even wait for verbal confirmation. He's going the opposite direction. He's still responsible for the safety of everyone on board. He dodges 6 icebergs throughout the night.
Yeah, and he converted the ship to become a hospital ship, and right down to making soup, making sure that there would be soup on board, and we have that iconic photo of Molly Brown presenting Captain Rostrun with the loving cup, which is in the Belfast Museum, which is quite interesting to see. But I'm curious, I don't actually know what became of Rostrun. How did he, do you happen to know how he finished his career? Like what, this triumphant hero of the Titanic rescue, I don't know what became of him. It must have been a tough act to follow after all that heroism.
Yeah, well, what's interesting, and this is kind of another one of those contrasts. So Captain Lord, he had sort of aspired to fill the ranks and the role of the shoes of Captain Smith, to carry the wealthy and the famous across the Atlantic. And of course, he falls, and he ends his career, Captain Lord, carrying nitrates to South America. Beautiful euphemism there for bird droppings. Versus Captain Rostrun does sort of fill the shoes of Captain Smith and becomes essentially the next Captain Smith, of just this very respected captain. He was in this crucible and proved himself, and so he became this very successful captain and reputation that everyone should aspire to, of just this wonderful role model.
What's your feeling about Captain Smith? Because he's a controversial figure. Yes, he was popular with the traveling folks of the day, but he's mired in controversy with how he may or may not have mishandled the voyage himself. And there's still controversy as to whether or not he was a hero or made terrible mistakes.
You're right. And he is still a very controversial figure. I get this question a lot at the different places that I speak at, and I wish I could go on and on about it. But to put it succinctly, it's a tough one because of the standard operating procedures at the time. Like, if we're comparing Captain Smith's actions to how we would want a captain to act today, of course he doesn't measure up. But at the time, in context, up until the moment of hitting the iceberg, by and large, he followed standard operating procedure. I usually draw on the example that it was standard operating procedure to maintain cruising speed until ice was actually spotted by your own vessel. And so although he is receiving certain ice warnings, not all of them, he's acting in accordance with what most captains would have done at the day. Of course, you can't categorically say that, but generally speaking, there isn't a whole lot of, Captain Smith acted in stark contrast to any other captain, how he would have made a decision.
He was also under pressure from Ismay to go faster. Is that apocryphal, that story, that that he was under pressure to make a record time into New York, as well as being, the most luxurious liner. They wanted their headlines. And
I think for the most part, we generally agree that Captain Smith was in full control, was in full decision-making power. And that, obviously this is still a controversial topic between Ismay and Captain Smith, but by and large, I do believe that Captain Smith was running the show and they weren't trying to
I
make a
agree.
speak record.
I'm actually reading a book about Captain Smith at the moment, and one of the interesting things was disputing that Ismay was pressuring him, that they would want to make good time just because it was a new ship, it was a maiden voyage, and there's also a school of belief that it is better to go quickly through an ice field than slowly, that you want to get through it as quickly as possible. And plus, it hadn't occurred to me before, it's RMS Titanic. It was a mail ship. And the idea of delivering the mail quickly is also an important factor to speed. So there are a lot of things, but Ismay, of course, is always painted as a terrible mustache twirling villain.
So true. But oh yes, you made me think of a really good thing with the ice. So yes, the maintaining cruising speed thing, that was also because prevailing thought was that you should go fast through an ice field unless there's fog. So that should be the only condition that you're actually slowing down the ship.
Yeah.
Well, that is a great key to your leadership lessons, because the Titanic disaster, as with probably any disaster, is a perfect storm of coincidences, happenstance, anytime you have a car accident, you go, oh, if I'd left 5 minutes earlier, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
What ifs? So your leadership lessons tell you how to handle the what ifs, the unexpected.
Yes. Oh my gosh, so true. It has such bearing for, how we think about our daily lives, of just these practical lessons, but making us reflect on how all the little dominoes stack up, hopefully for good, but ultimately, yeah, sometimes things don't go well.
Yeah, I want to make sure we get the book in one more time and find out what's next.
The Iron and Ice Full Tale of the Titanic is the book, but the presentation is
Oh,
called Leadership in Crisis, Titanic, Carpathia, Californian.
Yes. And all the links will be down in the notes. No, I wanted to take it back to the rooms in which you give your presentation with these young cadets.
Oh, yes.
All of them are like Titanic fans. Do they just go, oh, this is my favorite talk ever, I've been since I was 6, and I want to be a sailor and a mariner because of Titanic? Do you get any of those direct sort of links to why these young men are looking to be mariners?
I've got a couple people who are very into Titanic. I haven't had anyone say to me, oh, I'm in like Naval ROTC because of Titanic. I don't know. Maybe they are and they don't tell me that.
Was it Titanic?
If they are, please come tell me. I'd love to hear it. But I do have people who come up to me afterwards, and there are some very interesting connections. I'm surprised, actually, the very first time I gave this talk, besides Notre Dame, this was at Rice, and I had one person who knew the little bit of information about Jack Phillips tinkering with the wireless set the day before fixing it, and how that wasn't, standard protocol. They're supposed to wait for someone in New York to do that. I was so impressed. I was like, oh my gosh, these people, they know.
And on a completely esoteric and not deep note, you must get asked out. These young guys must just go, oh my God, she's so smart, she's so beautiful. Have you been asked out? Do they ever cross the line?
So that's actually such a funny question. So I've had a couple on Instagram.
That's a yes.
But
I can tell by your face. It's a yes.
Nobody has. They've been perfect gentlemen to me. Truly, they really have. They've been great group. I do get looks during the presentation sometimes.
They retire at 42 with a pension and then go get another job.
I've
You'll
had
have a
some
long
untrue
time.
things happen on LinkedIn, but that's a saga for a different time.
She's being very discreet, Nelson. Well done for asking the question, but she's being very discreet.
Well, for our audience that's watching this on YouTube, they know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's very
Anything
sweet.
else? What's next, Kelly? Do you have another book brewing in that huge brain of yours?
Well, thank you for asking. So I am actually, partly because of you and recent recording with Narrative Leadership Story Talks, I'm expanding the case study into a 3-day immersive workshop package. So first day will be standard decision forcing case study as it stands. But second day, we're actually going to have people take the HEXACO personality assessment. We're going to unpack what that means for leadership, decision making, all the things. Day 3 will be moral decision making, organizational climate, trust, all that kind of research findings and how that impacts leadership. So currently working on actually making that. And I'm particularly excited to, I haven't announced this anywhere else yet, so this is your first to know, that in November, I'll be speaking at the Naval Academy. So really excited about that. But filling out the rest of the calendar.
Well, you are what our society needs. We need somebody to make leadership, responsibility, and integrity seem cool again, because the pendulum really needs to swing back to that. So Kelly Skwarcan, thank you. Thank you for being on Titanic Talk, and thank you for the fine, important work you do.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Nelson, Alexandra. Thank you for the work that you do. Truly, it's been such a pleasure.
We get tickled by it, don't we, Nelson?
Well,
talking. We do nothing but talk, the two of us. So we might as well talk about Titanic.
It's a gift, and
you're awfully great at it.
So wonderful to expand our circle to include friends like you. Thanks.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited. We've launched a line of Titanic Talk merch, a cap, a mug, a tote, a t-shirt or a hoodie. You'll be sure to find a unique gift for the Titaniac in your life. Look for the link in the notes and on Instagram, or go to bit.ly/Titanic Talk Shop.